All right, welcome to episode 13 of the Urban Indianz Podcast. I'm your host, Gabriel Nightshield, joined once again by Levi Hansen.
Hello.
And we got special guests,
Black Demon,
and Kyrie is with us once again. Shar and Kathy did not, they are unable to make it today, so it'll just be us holding it down today. So today is, or when this comes out, it'll be the day before Halloween, so we kind of wanted to touch on some Halloween type stuff. I know natives are usually good for some scary stories and shit like that. I know I was talking to Kyrie the other night, and she was telling me a bunch of ghost stories. I was like, why don't you come back on and educate us in some G-cheese.
G-cheese?
Yeah. So
is that term the universal one? G-cheese?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Fucking.
I mean, because everybody's got something different, but I've always, everywhere else, I was G-cheese. Little kids running around, oh, G-cheese. Oh.
The G-cheese.
Is that with G's or with cheese?
I don't know.
Cheese? Heck yeah. Well, I don't personally have any ghost stories. So, I'm just going to listen and get scared.
All right. Do you want to start us off, Kyrie, with a story?
Sure. Well, first of all, my name is Kyrie. Last name is DuMarce. I'm enrolled Sistine Wapton Oyate. I'm also a half Oglala from Pine Ridge. I work at the St. Joseph Indian School as a donor care specialist, and I graduated from the Flandreau Indian School. That's a boarding school out in Flandreau. So most of my ghost stories originate from there. One of the stories that I shared with Gabe was the girl that grins from ear to ear. It's pretty creepy if you ever seen her. She fell from the second floor stairs all the way to the bottom, and occasionally you'll see her peek around the corner smiling from ear to ear. Another story I heard was that they seen her under their bed. They also say if there's a chair next to your bed, we live in dorm rooms, bunk beds, so if you have a chair sitting there, someone will be watching you at night.
That girl that fell. That girl that fell. Like, how long ago was that?
I have no idea when that happened, but
was that based on something real?
Yeah.
Or just, urban legend always is,
Yeah. Like,
based on true story.
And she died, I'm assuming? Or she just fell?
She just died. She just fell.
Got out and just start
smiling at people.
Being a fucking weirdo.
But one of the more personal stories that I had was one of the dorm rooms that I was staying in with my roommate, Julia Starr. And I don't want to say this, but we were getting high, and the ceiling, you could hear the sound of a golf ball just dropping repeatedly. And so we started getting really frustrated and mad. We were starting to yell and say, stop it, knock it off. And we even grabbed a broomstick and started hitting the ceiling. And it still wouldn't stop. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to talk to these freshmen because they were right above the senior floor. Ran upstairs, started banging on the door. Nobody was answering. So I opened the door. And it was completely dark. Nobody was in there. And I just felt like a cold draft. So I just closed the door, went back downstairs. I was like, they must have left as soon as I came up here. And my friend Julie was like, no, that sound was happening the entire time. So we grabbed our stuff and we took off outside.
Gross.
Yeah.
Huh.
That's fucked up though.
The only ghost story that I have, or my only experience in supernatural shit, was when I was in high school. We were staying at my friend's house or whatever, and it was me and two of my buddies or whatever. We were I can't remember. We were maybe sophomores or juniors or some shit like that. And he lived out. They call it 6 Mile Corner, which is just out in the middle of fucking nowhere in
6 miles from town.
Yeah, pretty much. But fucking we were messing around. It was 3:30, 4 in the morning, some shit. And his mom's in the next room or whatever, fucking getting pissed off. And then his door was open, so it was dark, but in the living room there was light, so you could see shadows and shit. And I was laying there, and I don't know what the fuck we were doing, wrestling around or fucking something, I don't know, but I looked at the doorway, and there was, like, someone standing there, so, like, it's like, oh, shit, you know, behave, and then it's just, like, one of those, like, where you know, move your head, like, it was there, so behave, and then they just weren't there anymore, and it was like, what the fuck, it was like, you know, in, like, a split-second type thing or whatever. That was the only thing I've ever seen.
Oh.
But, at that same house, my friend, he had said something like touched his face or whatever, like a ghost, because we used to always say that his house was fucking haunted because it was way out there.
Yeah.
And then he had like a spirit like touch his face, and like his whole fucking side of his face for like a week was like frozen, like he had like some kind of shit, I don't know, but
paralysis.
Like, yeah. And then he had to go to like ceremony and got like his face fixed, but it was fucking, yeah, that was weird.
That's pretty wild too, though. You know, especially with it like a physical element involved that everybody can see. You know.
Yeah, it was super fucking weird because like, yeah, his whole face was just like frozen. Like he'd be smiling and just one side of his face would be fucking smiling or whatever. It's like, yeah, and then he went to ceremony and then it got fixed.
Huh.
Another story I heard at Flandreau from one of my relatives was they were in their dorm room messing around with the Ouija board with a couple other girls, and the spirit that they were talking to, they were having this long conversation with, and then one of them said, "Show yourself." And from there, the door locked, the windows weren't able to be opened. I don't know if they were on second floor or first floor, but they said that they started seeing a shadowy figure bounce around the rooms, and they were at the point where they were scared and screaming, trying to get out. And by the time they got out, they had scratches all over them. And they said that a couple days later, they started having these bruises in areas that they couldn't recall how they would have gotten. But that's another reason why I don't ever mess with that type of stuff.
Right.
Just getting molested by ghosts.
Yeah. See, I never really fucked with like Ouija boards or nothing like that either. Like, I'm not. I guess maybe it's just more superstition than spirituality. I guess, but like, I don't know. I seen The Exorcist when I was too young, basically, you know, and then was like, well, I ain't never buying that shit, you know.
Yeah.
Even as like a little kid, and you walk past like the Milton Bradley version at Walmart, and you're like, oh, Jesus. You just feel like you're like stepping over a landmine real quick to get to the slinkies or something, you know.
That's the funny thing is that spirit boards have been around for a long time, but the actual like Ouija board with that term and the like layout that you're familiar with, it was invented in the 1920s by Milton Bradley, and they still own the copyright on it. So like they're the only ones that can make one in the U.S.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, spirit boards, like the premise of it pre-existed, but yeah, I think I knew that too.
But
like
the classic Ouija
like
board, they actually hold like the copyright.
What did they use those for? Like how far do those go back? Like spirit boards or whatever.
Oh man, well, that you get into like scrying and stuff like that. Which holy shit, that goes back to 2000 BC at least, as long as there's been written records. With,
really?
Like, scrying and oracles, and I mean, it wouldn't have been boards with. But the like idea that you could do things like that, communicate with the dead and stuff, it predates like the written language. So what you'd find is cultures that would use like chicken bones is the really common one you'd hear, because the Romans would still do that,
read them,
even like up until they were like documenting shit. You'd hear about we cast the chicken bones, and there were men refused to fight this battle today because literally a guy they called the Chicken Man has said that the battle would go badly. And there's a famous motto in Roman history that's like, don't ignore the Chicken Man, because there's cases where famous generals would like go, no, we have to attack today, and the men were like, no, the Chicken Man says that's bullshit, we can't attack today or we're all gonna die, and they will rebel against the general and throw him out because the men believe in that.
Yeah, I wonder how that started.
Well, that's also a Native American culture too. It's called shaking of the tent, where they make these poles, they dig them into the ground, and then they put like some type of hide around it, and then they have their medicine man or their shaman go in there, and he's completely naked, and sometimes he's even tied up, so you couldn't even, like, there's no way that he could have shaked the tent. But by the time he gets in there, it just starts shaking all night long, and they're chanting, and there's sparks of flame coming out in the center of it, and they say that that's where they get their answers from, kind of like a turtle spirit, or they refer to it as a turtle. But yeah, that's also a Native American culture thing.
Crazy.
I like Egyptians used to like, you know, like just throw like somebody's guts all over the table and be like, well, the guts made this kind of formation, so
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Which is kind of like, I don't know, like oracles and stuff, you know. I mean, basically, I mean, that kind of level of it has been around like way before.
Yeah, and that's a pretty universal human thing, because I mean, you get into like the Aztecs and the Mayans and stuff like that. They do that with like, you know, prisoners of war and stuff like that, where they would use their blood as a scrying item.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, definitely. Which sometimes like that kind of stuff, like I slightly think like maybe it's slightly real, that like a whole world who didn't have any really major amounts of communication with one another at the time all came up with like the same weird idea that talking to the dead was some kind of a level of trustable science, you know what I mean? And it's like, how do all of you come up with that idea without it having something like, well, it's probably true, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Where is the grain? It's like, where is the grain of truth in that? Because it's such a universal human thing across like all cultures and all over the world.
Like everybody poops and everybody can talk to the dead. You know what I mean? It's like the same premise. Like, where did that come from?
Worst children's book ever.
I think that's because Pangea was real, and I think Atlantis was real.
Yeah, and it could be, you know, Pangea, you know. Bitch don't know about Pangea. You ever heard of that? She don't know about Pangea.
Little Dicky.
Little Dicky. She don't know about Pangea.
Fucking stupid.
But I think that's true too. You know what I mean? Like, that to me is like more believable than anything. And then maybe it is just like one common tribal type behavior set amongst, you know, one huge massive continent, as opposed to it breaking up. But it is interesting when all of us have something in common like that. You know,
like
what
every
I mean?
culture says that there was a big flood that happened.
Oh yeah, flood mythology is pretty universal. You mentioned the ancient Egyptians. That was one of the centerpieces of their religion. You see that in the Abrahamic religions with like the story of Noah.
Mm-hmm.
Noah himself is like a character referenced in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is the oldest written story from anywhere in the world that we have, and he just offhand mentions that, oh yeah, Noah, that guy's been alive for like 300 years, even after the flood, and he lives near the mouth of the Euphrates, like, you know, 100 miles south of here.
Right.
And, you know, they and that's like way before like the Old Testament of the Bible was like thousands of years.
Yeah.
And they're like already talking about Noah.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you mean old dude? Oh, I wonder if he means old Ben Kenobi.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck.
That is pretty crazy, though. That's pretty cool. Dirty, do they got any? They got anything in like Belize like that, like tales?
Yeah, we got your folk tales, you know, like the chicken foot lady, you know, lady with, she just got like 3 big ass toes, like a chicken foot.
Dang.
Got this dude that they call Tata do Hende. He's like, from his waist down, he's turned backwards.
Oh,
So
shit.
it's like a, you know.
That
So,
would
we
suck.
do have
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Well, how do you spell that?
What's that?
Tata.
Tata do Hende. It's like, I guess it was like a real dude that he got injured in an accident. His body was twisted.
And they just made his legacy like, oh, and he was a fucking demon too, you know.
Yeah, you know,
How the fuck?
they say he used to go out and chase people and shit. And,
Maybe he was a jerk too.
Yeah.
So, I think like you said, it's just culture and
Right,
everybody got their own.
because even like your rap name is like Black Demon and stuff like that, and I always kind of wondered if it was like offset within.
Are you a demon?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of how I got my name, because you know we were experimenting with a Ouija board, and my version of the story, you know, we did our thing, and I thought nothing happened. I went home that night, but according to people, like I blacked out.
Oh, for
You
real?
know, and they had to take me home. But in my mind, I went home on my own, and And ever since, like, people say, like, when I get mad, like, they see horns sticking out and stuff like that. So, kind of pick up, people call me Black Demon. I know this chick gave me the name Hasapa Wanaki. I guess it means, like, some type of demon in the native.
Is it?
Hasapa means black.
Yeah.
And then
Wanagi,
Spirit.
Spirit,
it's like
black
a dark
spirit.
or something like that. So that's how the name came about.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Huh.
Pretty scary. Pretty
Wish I had a
scary
nickname
fella.
with that much of a badass origin story to it.
yeah.
They called me the dude because they caught me sleeping on a rug one time.
Yeah, I guess I never knew that. That, you know, like where that black demon come from. But I always wondered because, you know, South America seems to be so much more like still in like a major amount of belief when it comes to like psychic issues or, you know, witches and stuff like that, where like here in America we've just kind of like that's a TV show now.
Yeah, it
We've
felt
already-
like
yeah.
voodoo is like a real thing down there.
Yeah,
Like-
like voodoo is like a real thing down
Yeah,
there.
like something you just have to deal with day to day. Like,
It is
guys,
really, like where I'm from, our type of voodoo, we call it obia. It's like it's voodoo, but it's like, you know, for a culture type. So it's called obia, and people put spells.
Because like in North America, they practice hoodoo.
Hoodoo, yeah.
So
Yeah.
So yeah, I've never heard about that. That's cool.
it's a
Obia.
mixture too, because like where I'm from, Belize, it's like we got the Mayans too. You know,
Yeah.
we got a lot of the ruins, so it's like some of the Mayan
Yeah, that's
culture.
just south of Quintana Roo and like the
Like,
Yucatan and stuff.
Yeah, the
right?
Yucatan, Guatemala. So it's like all that culture just mixed into one boiling pot
Sure.
there, and so you get some crazy stories and beliefs and stuff. So
Right.
I'll bet.
That is crazy.
I wonder if there's a place in town where you could learn voodoo. That's what I want to start. I want to become like a witch doctor.
Well, I know that they have like witch like Wiccan sections here in town.
yeah.
Really?
Wow.
Well, over at Fatty's Taddy's, the shop that used to be right next door was like a Wiccan store, like stones and cards and everything you needed, you know, herbs and all this stuff for your whatever they did, you know.
Cauldrons.
Well, I don't know. Like, I think it was all like white Wiccan stuff. Like, well, usually from what I've gathered, and I worked for another guy at a tattoo shop, and he was like an old biker, but he was like hardcore on Wiccan shit, like super believed in like the power of stones and stuff like that. And like, he was telling me that there's like multiple groups here. Then they practice different levels of, you know, white Wiccans and black Wiccans, and every time we hear stuff negative about like witches and wizards and shit, it's always because of the black Wiccan stuff. That's where all the potions and stuff comes from. But really, as I learned, like from the white Wiccans, is they really just seem like super hippies. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we just like, oh yeah, we go hug and kiss trees and tell them we appreciate them, and like stones, they super believe in stones, you know. And to a sense, that almost seems kind of native. Like they believe in the spirit and on all the elements, you know. And,
Yeah.
And we kind of do that too, you know. But
That's what that, what's his name?
Burning Man.
who?
I was
No.
thinking of Burning Man. 'Cause
Oh,
they
That
all-
party?
Yeah.
That, we had him on the show. David, I'm totally spacing his name. From...
the one that helped with the dignity sculpture.
Yeah. He
yeah,
had
yeah.
like these fucking smooth ass fucking rocks that he would bring to meetings and shit like that.
Yeah, the rocks that are actually round, like completely round.
Yeah.
They refer to as spirit rocks.
Yeah, like he had like a big ass one, like one that was like gigantic.
Right. See, when they say things like crystal ball, and then every time I see a crystal ball, it looks like just like a glass bulb. But then I always imagine it to be like, but it's made of crystal. So this thing is actually like a really dense, fat ass, super shined up rock. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like that maybe they shined up to look, you know, to see through and everything. But the idea that a lot of the stuff that they get, or their good feelings or bad feelings, is like with rocks and stuff, is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Especially when you correlate it to your own culture, and then you find out, or you find the back and forth. But like, a lot of the witches that I've ever met aren't black Wiccan, and so they're always like, oh no, that stuff is terrible. You don't ever, I've never touched a tarot card in my life. You know what I mean? Like stuff
I need
like that.
to know
but
more witches. What do you mean all the witches you've ever met? Like I don't think I've ever met a witch before.
I've probably met like
You
five
can
or
get around
six.
most.
Yeah. I'm like fuck.
I met 5 or 6. You know, just keep going to the metal shows. You know what I'm saying? Just keep going to the metal shows.
You'll be surprised how many people dabble in that though.
Well, yeah.
But they don't want to say.
Even if they don't consider themselves to be like Wiccan or any kind of like or acknowledge any level of like what you would call pagan or anything, some of this shit is like in self-help books to the point where somebody's like, I read a book that helps me with my life and it's through this level of guidance, and it's kind of the same ideology that's already possessed by a kind of different kind of culture. So, you know, it's kind of out there more than you'd think.
Yeah. That's, I don't know. I need to learn more. That's what.
Yeah, I don't know where they gather. I don't know if they call them covens for real or not. But like, I don't know if there's any one building. Like I said, the store that used to sell all like the holistics and everything that they would sell for that, they would have like meetings there. Them and their 6, 7, 8 friends
meeting. That's what I want to do. That would be cool.
We ended up taking that shop over and just used it as like storage and rehearsal space and stuff like that. And I mean, I never, you know, I actually stayed the night in that a couple of times and never ever felt any kind of different energy one way or the other, knowing that it was like a cave for that stuff. But
speaking of that, it just reminded me of that Alex Johnson in Rapid City is haunted.
Yeah, the hotel.
Yeah. And wasn't it on like Ghost Hunters or something?
Oh yeah, that hotel is haunted as fuck.
Yeah. We stayed there once. Me and my friend Nikki and Sonny Red Bear, and Sonny's son. Me and Maniac stayed there before too. But when we were there with Sonny, like her son just kept like pointing up in the corner and like talking to like the fucking corner. I was like, what the fuck? Like this is it. Like it was fucking weird. And like. Yeah,
I hate it when kids do shit like that.
Yeah, and it happened like more than once. Like it was like an ongoing thing throughout the fucking weekend. It was weird.
Like when my baby was, you know, the baby does the like stare at the ghost behind you stuff, you know, like just stare. And it's like that is some of the scariest shit. Or like our 5-year-old has like starting last year developed a imaginary friend. So sometimes she'll say shit and you're just like. You know, I don't know how to tell your imaginary friend to not be doing that kind of stuff, but you know what I mean? Like, she always says like some crazy shit sometimes, and it's like, you guys are on the wrong adventures. You know? I don't mind you having an imaginary friend, but you know, when you're like, oh, we crawled all over the ceiling last night and all this stuff, I'm like, oh my god, no, you didn't. Oh, I walked on the ceiling with my friend Emma. That's her
fucking
friend's name. Is
spotters
Emma.
in there.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that her friend is like Emma, another 4-year-old little girl, is like terrifying. I was like, if I ever sneak off to the bathroom and see an apparition of Emma, I'm gonna fucking not make it to the bathroom.
A unicorn or a dragon, it would be better.
Exactly. If it was her friend Pete the Dragon or something, I'd be way cool with that.
Shit.
I've never had one too.
I've never been to a haunted place before. I went to this theater in Watertown, and they said it was, and I was like, y'all full of shit. It's just a shitty building that's not haunted.
Yeah, me and Maniac stayed in that Alex Johnson. We asked to stay in the haunted room. Like whatever, I don't remember what room it was, but we were like, can we want that room? Like,
Great call.
Yeah. Nothing happened. I mean, I woke up and Maniac was like cutting himself and lighting his blood on fire, but like, but that's just fucking Maniac. So I mean, like.
But, yeah, that's just Maniac.
Yeah, that would have happened no matter what room we were in.
That's why he scared them away.
Yeah, Motel 6, it don't matter.
I'd say like the closest thing that I've ever got to, I don't know, like an actual real kind of maybe spiritual thing was like when I was a little kid and it was bedtime and stuff like that, I'd like to stay up late and read and stuff like that. And so my mom would come check up on me. And her tell was always her knee cracked like all the time. So like pop all the time. So when I hear her knee pop, coming to check up on me, you know, I put the book away and pretend I was sleeping and go back to it. And then after she had passed away when I was 10, then I lived in that house for the other 8 years. And then like every night, like clockwork too, like within the same hour, it was you could hear that knee pop. You know what I mean? Like you could hear it, and I was just like, and every time I heard that, it's either because I associated that sound with my mother's knee popping, so I got kind of chilled from it, or what they say, you get the chills because that is like this presence or whatever. But I always got that all the time, and like I wasn't intimidated by it, but I always like I would make mental note like, oh yeah, it must be my mom or something, you know what I mean? Like, because then my dad would always say that, well, your mom's here all around us all the time, and she's here and she's always gonna keep an eye over you and stuff like that. And I never thought that meant the house was haunted with my mom or nothing, but
Yeah.
you know, like that was the one thing I've ever noticed that could have been considered spiritual, is that noise kind of just stayed, you know, to this day probably. Even like if I went to stay the night, it'd still be there, I bet you.
Crazy.
Because it never went away. But
Huh.
it's not scary because, you know, it's like my mom. Maybe if it was like, oh, the old lady that lived here before us and died on the porch, you know, or something like that, it'd be scarier. But
It's like the Babadook.
the Babadook.
Yeah.
When you were saying like the chicken lady, that, and you just said Babadook, that reminded me of like, you know that movie John Wick?
Yeah.
And they call him Baba Yaga.
Yeah.
Well, I looked that up, and in like Russia, that's like a chicken lady. It's like a witch with chicken feet that lives in like a birdhouse. Like if you see pictures of it, it looks like stupid, but apparently that's what Baba Yaga was. It wasn't a boogeyman. It was like a witch with chicken feet. You know what I mean? So when you said that, it was like,
Something like that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chickens got big, sort of big in like the witchcraft.
They're big in it. They're like the easiest things to kill without feeling bad. So you can just, you know, just slit their necks and use them for everything.
That and the reptile-like features.
Yeah.
Reptiles, there's the whole theory in evolutionary psychology about reptiles making people nervous for evolutionary reasons.
Reptilians.
And so, what's that?
Reptilians.
Yeah, like snakes and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Big lizards, probably from fighting dinosaurs. I don't know, but no. I'm guessing that part of it is the reptilian, like, you know, like their legs and stuff like that is all very like not mammal.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, isn't there like a theory that like dinosaurs had fucking feathers? And
Feathers.
shit
So
like
it's
that?
more than a theory. It's true.
Oh yeah, very much true. Yeah, they're just big birds. You know, tons of them.
Yeah.
And I think like at the Children's Museum in Brookings, like the mom was like a scaly dinosaur because they have these huge dinosaurs in the yard that make noise and move. But the big mom but the baby dinosaur is covered in all sorts of feathers. And they made that, they were like, maybe they think, well, yeah, these dinosaurs were born with feathers, and then they like molt out of them and they get big enough or whatever. Some of them even maintain them their entire life. But they were saying, yeah, it's totally true that the T-Rexes and stuff like that used to have feathers all over them. It's just kind of interesting because birds look exactly like reptiles, you know? Really gross, like, too, when you really get to look at them and stuff. Like, I used to have a pet parakeet, or a cockatiel, I mean.
Yeah.
And, like, I'd sit with them and I'd pet them and stuff, and if you just stare at one long enough and you're like, ugh. You know what I mean? I love the little bird and everything, but if you just, I don't know, maybe because it's an all-black eye or something like that, but I was like, you're kind of gross. Like, at first you're cute, but then you're, like, kind of fucking gross. Like a little lizard, you know?
I never realized like I got this Baphomet on my fucking shirt, but
Yeah.
like I fucking never realized like that goats had fucking like crazy eyes like that until like maybe like 2-3 years
really?
ago at the zoo. I seen a goat and I was like, what the fuck?
Goat eyes are like the most frightening shit of all
Goats are
time.
fucking mean, man.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They're used a lot too when it comes to like sacrifices and stuff like that. And I don't know what that is, but even in like Christianity, it's like sheep and goat's blood, everything, you know.
Yeah.
But
Because that's what they used to slaughter back in the day.
Yeah, it was the livestock they had available.
it's just kind of crazy. Did you see that movie?
The witch.
The Witch. Yeah, and it's just like that goat's just staring, and then it has like a voice like, oh, you know, like, why did you call me? And it's like, what the fuck?
I have to rewatch that movie because I see all these like top 10 lists where they say that movie's like super scary or some shit. I thought it was dog shit when I saw it. It was fucking terrible.
At first, I was like that too, and then it got like, then that witch like fucking like just like fucking stuck that knife in that baby. It was like they didn't show that, but like just the premise of that happening, it kind of made it like really fucking gross for me for the whole movie.
Violence.
Yeah, because apparently that movie is like just a collection of like the most popular witch stories from that time, all pulled together and made to affect like one family just for cinematic purposes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I watched that like by myself, and I was just kind of like, it felt like watching like Gummo or Kids or something by the end of it. You know, like you're like, hurts my stomach.
I have
just
to rewatch it. 'Cause, yeah, I thought
I would. It's
the
kind
movie
of
was terrible.
When you rewatch it, look at the corn that they're eating at one point.
Mm-hmm.
It's got that big bulbousy mold on it or whatever. And so the director has neither confirmed nor denied a fan theory that they hallucinate the whole thing.
Oh, really?
Because that's a theory about the Salem witch trials, is that there's a certain bacteria that grows in grain that was really common there, and there was an outbreak of that at the time. And if you eat enough of it, you'll hallucinate.
Mm-hmm.
And so they think that was part of what fueled the hysteria of the like witch trials and stuff like that in Salem.
Yeah.
And that then film nods to that by having that same fungus growing on the corn that they're eating.
Huh. I do want to watch it again because, I mean, you're right. It's like super boring. There's no dialogue in the movie, and I really don't like that shit. Like The Revenant, they don't talk enough for me to like it. But there's just a couple of things that they do in that movie. It was very unsettling for me. So
did you watch that movie Kill List?
No.
Have you seen that? It's fucking... Have you seen that movie?
No.
It's like I don't think it ever was like a major release or whatever, but it's like these like two hitmen, and they're on these contracts or whatever, and then it starts off like the whole movie is this one thing about these hitmen, and then like the last like 20 minutes they stumble into like this fucking witchcraft ceremony, and it just completely fucking flips the whole script of the movie.
Really?
And it's it's fucking terrible. Like
and then they ruin it. Yeah.
No. I mean like it's great. It's one of the best movies I've seen in like the last 10 years because it's just completely out of nowhere. It just completely changes everything, and it's so fucked up the way it ends. Like he ends up stabbing his kid to death. Spoiler alert. And it's fucking crazy.
I don't ever mind spoilers because 9 times out of 10 I'm not gonna watch a movie.
That's me. I hadn't seen the Witch, but I kind of... It's one of those where you watch the trailer and you hear the reviews, and by the time you're all done, you're like, I pretty much know what's going on here. I'm done. Yeah.
If you get the chance, watch Kill List. I don't know if it's on Netflix or Hulu, but watch it. It's fucking great.
I'll check it out. The only other time a movie ended with like a real witch thing was like one of those Paranormal Activity movies.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one it was, but I do remember it was the first time they ever mentioned that paranormal investigators will use like those Xbox 360 motion controllers, to like detect ghosts.
Number 3.
Yeah, and then like at the end of it, it was like, oh, okay, so it's ghosts. But then at the end of it, like, no, it's not ghosts. All your neighbors are like hardcore into Satan, and the Antichrist is like being born and stuff. I was like, that's such a, and it was like all just spooky ghost stuff. And then the ending just was like a complete 360 change, and it was like, oh man, I hated it.
Why would LiDAR work on a ghost? Because if you can't see it,
well, I know
LiDAR is visible spectrum light, and
I watch Ghost Adventurers all the time, and they also use that technology in real life, and it's kind of creepy, like, oh look, and then the whatever body shows up, it's always like glitching and stuff, like, and they're like, oh my god, it's breakdancing, oh my god, what do we do? But my girl is like 100% addicted to Ghost Adventures. You know what I mean? Like the same way I only really watch South Park. She only really watches like Ghost Adventures on a loop.
Sure.
So. I think that's the fakest one out.
Yeah. The thing I hate about that show, is though, like, it's an hour long, so automatically that sucks to watch one thing for an hour. And they spend the first like 30 minutes like just talking about what they're gonna do. Then they go do it, and then like right in the middle they'll find something like pretty interesting and compelling that damn near to the point where you're like, oh, like, and then they're like, and then the show's over. They don't ever elaborate on that anymore. They're like, we got the greatest piece of evidence we ever had, but instead of digging deeper into that, we just kind of let it go because it's all fake. You know what I mean? Like, and I hate that. That makes me like not care about Paranormal Activity. There was one time I was like super addicted to it, but doing research and stuff. But man, that show fucking pisses me off for that. They're like, oh man, because sometimes just a couple episodes I've seen have gotten pretty good. Like they'll say something like, "Can you close that door?" And the door will just like slam shut, or something. And it's like, well, if they didn't rig that up, like if then that's pretty cool. But then they don't go deeper into that.
I don't know. I can't take those shows seriously at all.
They did an episode in Navajo country, Skinwalker Ranch or whatever, and that was like so much bullshit because they're like these like they got all the like people that lived there to come up and be like, oh, don't do it, please don't do it. We're gonna come with you and bring a gun and just in case and all this stuff, and then they're like, you will die, and then like they didn't like get nothing, and they made all that setup to the point where it was like, oh, there was a fire, like we lit a fire yesterday, and then we went down into the cave, and then when we came back, the fire was moved. Now there's writings on the walls, and all this stuff, and you're like, oh, how did all that happen? But then nothing else, and it's like, God, I hate that. I'm still really interested in like EVPs though. Like that's always interesting to me.
I'm sure the show was just like, because it's not like this shit happens on demand. So it's like if they show up to film for 5 days, it's like their producers got to make something happen.
Yeah, that's what I'm like.
But you can't force that kind of shit, because like Skinwalker Ranch is like, I can understand why they spent a lot of time there and did an episode about it, because that is like a huge epicenter for like paranormal stuff, everything from like, you know, lycanthropes to lots of UFO activity, all sorts of crazy shit out there. And yeah, that's a really famous one. I listened to a whole bunch of like supernatural podcasts and stuff like that, and at least 4 of them that I can think of off the top of my head have done either an episode or like a series of episodes about Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah. What is Skinwalker Ranch? I don't know what it is.
So it's this ranch. It's in like Navajo country.
It's in Navajo country.
Yep. And its legend is because it's kind of an epicenter for activity for skinwalkers, which are the Navajo or Native American equivalent of like a werewolf.
Yeah.
But
Shape-
like on steroids. Yeah. They're like more power. They've got more like powers and stuff.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, there's lots and lots of mysterious lights in the sky there and stuff like that. And there was even a guy in the 70s that bought a chunk of the ranch, and he set up all sorts of surveillance cameras and brought in all sorts of like research equipment and stuff like that. And he would have like lights fly through the sky at night and blow up his cameras and cut his wires and stuff like that. And so it's there's like books and books written about Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
If you Google it and check that out. There's probably like 50 documentaries on YouTube about it. We could do a whole show about the stuff that happens there. But it's a really famous episode.
Where what state is it in?
It's like northern
New Mexico.
Yeah, New Mexico.
Yeah, right northern too, like almost on the border of the other states.
Yeah, like getting into Utah and stuff, because it's got to be near Nevada, because I believe it's near. It's not Area 51, but it's near that gigantic military test range.
Yeah, that.
I was going to ask if it was near Area 51.
And like from what I had seen, like, and I know like there's lore in all sorts of different Native American communities, but I don't think I've ever noticed anybody take anything more seriously than Navajos do with skinwalkers. You know what I mean? Like up here, it seems like we'll use like chichis or like the tall man and stuff like that to scare the kids, but like over there, they're like. You know, old ladies are crying like, "Oh, please, you know, like don't say Skinwalker in my house." You know what I mean? Like, all sorts of like they super believe it and things like that. And that's because they'll like, they see a coyote and they're like, well, "That motherfucker right there." You know what I mean? Like, that's that thing right there, or you know, because they're shapeshifters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you can tell, like like I've seen them interview about shit, and you can just kind of tell that there's a level of serious faith that this is a thing in their community.
Genuine
you know what
fear.
I mean? Yeah,
you know?
genuine. You know, it's really cool. I mean, it sucks, but it's kind of really cool, you know, to know that they believe in something like that, because I would like someone to make a believer out of me, you know, because I think there's a difference in just being in a scary situation and being generally spooked by stuff, and then being like, "Yep, I seen a fucking ghost," and like I'm never going back. You know what I mean?
In St. Francis, where I grew up, like, did we talk about Sister No Head? Oh, was it on the air or off the air?
That was off the air.
That was off.
Okay, yeah, like the old, the fucking old school, like burned down, like in the 70s or some shit like that. And they said it was like the ruins just stayed there, like they never got rid of it. It was just like some fucking burned down school. And they said it was like fucking haunted by Sister No Head, was just the ghost that would fucking roam around in there and stuff. So we always grew up with that kind of shit. But then
you guys never went in there?
I think we did. I can't remember. I don't think so. We wanted fucking Sister No Head fucking getting
Sister
us.
No Head.
Yeah.
Which
is a nightmare in itself.
CG Hollow or something like that?
You mentioned
CG
that
Hollow?
off camera. Siston actually believes in that. Like, it's little green men that used to live in trees in that area, and they made noises if you came towards their trees.
Oh.
There's like Wawila men too, like in St. Francis. They said like they were like little people that had like fucking giant arms or something.
Really?
And they'd throw like the drunks around that were like laying around.
Like volleyball with
them.
Like,
yeah. They're like, don't go like uptown at night because the fucking Wawila men are around or whatever.
Huh.
Or then like tall men, like where I lived.
Tall men, yeah.
There was like I lived in teacher housing, and behind us, like maybe like 100 yards, 200 yards away, was like fucking woods and shit. And like my room growing up was probably like 10 feet off the ground, 10, 12 feet off the ground. So like you couldn't just like look in the window or whatever. And my bed was like right underneath the window. So I used to fucking have nightmares. Like I'd wake up and I'd look out the window and there'd be like a fucking tall man just like staring into my fucking room. That once you said tall man a few minutes ago, that sounds like, oh yeah, I used to have fucking nightmares about that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to tell me about that, like up in Eagle Butte is where that was really popular. Like he's looking through your window, he's tall enough to look through your window.
Yeah.
Now, I heard, and I asked you guys off air, but none of us really had an answer. But if anybody hears this on the internet, go ahead and tell us in the comments. But I was talking about some kind of thing where you're not allowed to look outside at night or something like that. Like don't look out the window at night. And what is that in reference to? Because none of us had an answer, so. Guess I'll ask Podcast Land what they know about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not looking outside at night or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one time, someone somewhere I think might have told me something because in my brain I think like it's something to do with because when they look back at you, it's like a possessive state or something like that. But I don't know the name of what the spirit is supposed to be or where it's popular at or nothing like that. So
I was just about to say because back home they told us that too. Don't look at. Because you might catch a spirit. Look, and like you said, if you lock eyes, then yeah, it'll be attached to you. So that's why you don't look outside at night. But
I was told that about mirrors.
Mirrors. I used to do that Bloody Mary shit all the time. Like like with no fear. Like oh yeah, Bloody Mary, blah 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 blah. You know, like I was Beetlejuicing it everywhere. Like because all my friends were afraid of that, and so that was like, you know, I did that at home one time, and then like. Got the jitters or it and realized this is all just Santa Claus bullshit. So I go to my friend's house like, let's do that, you know. And I'm the only kid that had the nuts to say Bloody Mary, you know, or Candyman or whatever the dumb shit, you know.
Biggie Smalls.
Yeah, Biggie Smalls. Biggie Smalls. That one's perfect, Biggie Smalls.
Oh shit!
Yeah. What's that on? I can't remember.
South Park.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's some of Biggie Smalls.
Fucking stupid.
That's great.
What do you think? Like speaking of like horror movies, like what do you think is like the all time scariest movies like that have like an impact on you?
For me, The Exorcist fucked me up. I was just a little too young. I was like 5 or 6 when I seen that, and I'm still kind of fucked up from it today. Like I still might have some kind of level of.
I saw that when I was like 19 or 20 and it fucked me up.
Yeah.
Like just like the little girl like just saying like the most ridiculous shit. Your mother sucks cocks in hell. What like Jesus Christ.
The two things that really fucked me up was like the subliminal flashes of like Captain Howdy or whatever, the white faced dude with the teeth. They flash that every once in a while. And like they did so many different things like somebody standing next to a wall, and then this like apparition of a demon that they found in Egypt showed up and then goes away again. That stuff like really fucked with me. And then the ultimate thing that like fucking made me like sleep with my parents for like a month straight was her coming down that fucking stairs.
Oh yeah,
that had me just
spider walk.
Yeah, I even still think about that like now, and I'm like, oh, that's not even tasteful.
I get that kind of creepies from The Thing.
Oh, I love The Thing. That's my favorite horror movie for sure.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick a favorite horror, like it would be The Shining.
The Shining, yeah, I love that too. I was in Denver and I so wanted to go to the Stanley Hotel, and they told me it was actually a little farther away than what I thought it was, so I didn't have time. But I swear to God, next time I go to Denver for a show or anything, I'm going to the Stanley Hotel.
I'm obsessed with The Shining. Have you seen that? Documentary.
Yes,
37?
I love that documentary.
Amazing.
It is amazing. The whole fake moon landing premise, the Kubrick premise, is great. Like, there's a couple of those people that have theories that I'm like, I don't care. You know, that's stupid. But the whole we're trying to tell you that we faked the moon landing thing was amazing.
I watched something like a documentary on that. I can't remember if we talked about this on the podcast like a couple weeks ago or not, but I feel like I've talked to you about this. But where it was a documentary on The Shining about how Jack was really like molesting Danny, and it was like
it's like a fan theory.
Yeah, like, and it really like changed my whole like perspective on the fucking movie after watching it. Like you know, like fucking his thing in his voice or in his little buddy or whatever was like a sign of like, you know, him forcing like oral sex on him and like all this stuff. And I don't know. I'm
Damn,
rambling,
I never
but
heard that theory.
It's
before, but-
fucked up though. It's fucked up because like he's in that room like right before he gets like throttled or whatever, and it ends with like the music is on like a fucking like a scary thing, and then Danny comes walking in later and he's like all fucked up. His shirt's all fucked up, and he he had gotten like Jack like molested him or some shit like that, and then Jack passed out and then had like his
Oh, and his mom was like, "What'd you do to my kid?"
Yeah, and
yeah.
he had like a fucking nightmare about like what he did to that to his son, and that's how like why he's in that room, and there's that fucking
Oh, so they use that like woman in the tub as like the mental Passover of him just doing that to his kid. Like the woman in the tub molested little Jack and then or molested Daniel, and then Jack goes in there and has sex with that woman. So really the connection is that. That's not a healthy theory, but I need to understand it.
I'll find that documentary. It was like 20 minutes long, but it completely changed my whole view of the fucking movie. It's like
what blew me away with 237 was when you follow the little boy around on the tricycle, and how if they draw a map of the floor plan of the room and the hotel and the hallway, it makes no sense because he's magically getting onto the second floor without ever going on stairs.
Right.
But you're following him the whole time, so there was no cutaway.
There was no cutaway. Yeah, they were explaining. That was crazy too. Like, what are those called? Like the stairs, like you go up the stairs and then you're at the bottom again. Yeah, that was weird. Like, how did they do that? Because they never took the camera off of him. You never notice a cut, so that...
And the carpet would change positions, and then what really blew me away, because it seems so obvious, like I should have noticed it watching it without the documentary,
right,
was the part where he's sitting there at the typewriter or whatever, before things get really crazy. Every time it cuts away from him, and then goes back to him, all the furniture in the background is completely being rearranged in every cut scene.
Yeah.
Like there's a chair, there's two chairs there, then there's a cabinet, then there's one chair there, then it's the two chairs apart, and it just every scene it's rearranging the furniture, and until they tell you that, you would never...
Right, yeah, you would never notice that.
I never did notice that.
They say it was Kubrick trying to create a subconscious level of unease.
Yeah.
So it's you were creeped, but you didn't understand why you were creeped out.
The pig man in that movie, when she's running up the stairs and she sees that guy in the fucking outfit and he's blowing that old guy or whatever. Yeah. That was another thing that they were talking about, that was her coming to the realization that there was some fucking he was fucking around or whatever. But that scene before just that scene in general has always just fucked me up.
Really
it's just,
hardcore,
a fucked up scene.
The second you see that, you're like, oh fuck, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Ever since I was a kid, it's just that scene just by itself is just a fucked up scene.
Yeah, and it's creepy. It is a creepy scene. It's why did they throw that in there? That's Kubrick, though. You know what I mean? That was that to me almost feels like a shout out to fucking Clockwork Orange, because they did that weird shit in there too. Let's just show you something that is offsetting and then go back to the movie.
That Eyes Wide Shut too. That
I love
movie
Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh yeah, it's so good and it's so fucked up. The soundtrack in that movie is just perfect,
phenomenal.
Yeah,
one of the best movie soundtracks of all time. Stanley Kubrick is I don't know. He's basically a cinematography god to me. He is the best director, I think.
It's just so the movie's just so unsettling. I watch it a lot, probably
Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah, just because it's just so fucked up.
Yeah, I always say that. I met my girl at an Eyes Wide Shut party.
Yeah.
That is a good movie, and Kubrick. Even as much as I like him, it's so hard to understand him. That you just say, "Yep, I appreciate it." You know what I mean? You can get a better grasp of why you like Quentin Tarantino more than you can Stanley Kubrick.
There's so many layers. You can watch it over and over and over, and it's something different. Yeah, every time.
You should watch that Room 237.
I've seen it.
Have you? Oh yeah, I love it. Yeah. I love it. Some of that stuff is a little far out there, but everything else is really interesting.
Yeah, even if you don't buy one of the theories, it's always interesting what they point out. Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there's one if you look over here into the side corner, Stanley Kubrick digitized his face into the mountain, and I was like, yeah, this guy is high, is what this guy's problem is. But everybody else seems decent, or, you know, all the sex puns that they try to make and everything like that.
Yeah.
You know, like all the
In the beginning of the movie, whenever he's like going for the interview,
yeah,
Jack's reading a Playgirl magazine.
a Playgirl, yeah, he's wearing a Playgirl, you know, and
Yeah,
they've made a bunch of you know, in that 237 there, I was like, yeah, and that whole interview process in that guy's office is one giant sex pun or something like that, you know.
Yeah, it's so weird.
What's Olive Oil's name? What's her name in that movie? I mean her
Wendy?
real name.
Oh,
yeah, Wendy, but
Uh,
Duvall, Shelley Duvall, right?
There you
yeah.
go.
She was good in that, you know what I mean? Like, honestly, I haven't seen, I don't know what else she was in other than Popeye, but like, that was probably like her role and that's it, you know what I mean? Like, don't even be in anything else, because you were just like the perfect amount of like ugly to be the perfect scared, timid, you know, victim. It was like perfect for her.
Yeah. They're saying, I was watching something last night. You know, like YouTube gets you locked in these like loops. Like once you watch something, then like a million
Oh,
different
yeah.
things.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
fucking, I was watching something, and they were saying that they were driving a connection between The Shining and It, and like fucking like all the reason those kids were able to defeat Pennywise was because they all had The Shining, and they were all like sexual, like were all victims of
Victims,
like,
yeah. So yeah, and that's the thing that in Stephen King's books, like everybody, they all are tied together, honestly, in some kind of way.
Yeah,
because like
Stephen King has a whole like extended universe that ties in with the whole Dark Tower thing.
that all leads to the Dark Tower stuff. Because like even when I read the book Hearts of Atlantis, which seems like has nothing to do with any of those other movies, they still are dealing with like The Shining and that and the Stephen King and the Hearts of Atlantis. Then they did it with like It. Yeah, they say that they had The Shining in that, and the same thing with the actual book.
That links into The Stand.
That leaks right into The Stand. Yeah, like and Seren, my girl, she's like super addicted to Stephen King, so she watches those too, and
yeah, like
some of those make a lot of sense, to be honest. Especially because when I was a kid and had read Hearts of Atlantis, and they started making like the Gunslinger and the Dark Tower references and stuff like that, and I was like, holy shit, you know what I mean? That was the first moment where I was like, all these books, like John Coffey from The Green Mile, like, you know what I mean? That was they all kind of have the same kind of like mental.
Well, yeah, well, like Dick Halloran from The Shining was in that fucking club that burnt down in It.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, see?
So,
Shit.
like, they're saying that, like, Pennywise was the real, like, villain in The Shining. Like, you know, because he's, like, a formless, you know, entity.
Right.
And that he might not even disappear 27 years. He might just go to fucking
Somewhere
Colorado
else.
and be fucking hanging out there over there. And then,
That's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That is pretty cool. Or like, what was that? What's that one book that Stephen King wrote in like the early 2000s? Like, the girl who loved Tom Jordan or someone like that. It was like a baseball player, but she was like lost in the woods and stuff like that. And that was also that was like a major tie into how The Shining works, because it was a you know, like this constant scary thing that kind of urged her to find. Eventually, she found a road or whatever, or the boy who loved Tom Jones or something like that. Not Tom Jones, but Tom Jones. I was the boy that loved Tom Jones.
Yeah. I think we all were.
Carlton. But yeah, and then I mean, The Thing though, that's a fantastic movie. Like when you said that Maniac was like cutting himself and burning his blood, I thought of The Thing right away. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that movie, and I don't know, maybe it's just Kurt Russell is why I like it so much, because I, for some reason, like every shitty movie Kurt Russell's ever been in. But
Well, he always uses it's lots of Kurt Russell movies or John Carpenter movies, and Carpenter is always doing the like so out there practical effects that just look amazing. Like
fantastic.
It's hilarious because they're like 20, 30 years old. And I take them a million times over the CGI version.
The 80s
Absolutely.
horror movies are, like, so much better than stuff today.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's, like...
So much.
I can't even get into...
Because it's gross. Like, what's the guy's name? Was it Tom Savini?
Yeah.
Like, the head makeup artist back in that
Yeah.
time? It was
the
fantastic.
guy that... Was he the one... That scene from American Werewolf in London where he's transforming into the fucking werewolf? It's no CGI. It's just all practical effects.
Yeah.
And it's definitely still the best, you know, werewolf fucking scene ever.
That's a decent movie. I'm not a huge horror movie fan. Like, I can't just pick up any slasher and get into it, you know.
Yeah.
But I definitely like the classics. Another one of my favorites is Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I've never seen that one.
That's a good one.
Phenomenal. Oh, that's just like, I don't even really count that as like a horror story, even though it's based off of Dracula. It's just, it's like an epic to me. It's like a film epic.
It's kind of an adventure kind of
Yeah.
aspect to it.
It is. It is. It's like reading the book, really. I mean, it's like if they made a Frankenstein movie, you know what I mean? Like, Frankenstein's not so much of a horror as it is to just kind of like a neat little adventure. You think it's a storybook kind of a monster. But
My daughter has a kid in her class named Vlad.
Vlad?
Yeah,
That's cool.
and I was like, nope, you're not hanging out with that motherfucker.
Yeah, Bram Stoker. You haven't seen that? That's so good. And probably my favorite actor of all time is Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
And so he just nails that role.
I'll have
Like,
to-
might be the reason why he is my favorite actor of all time.
I think, yeah, I'll have to check that out. I can't remember. There was a reason why I didn't watch it, and I can't remember what it was. But
Star-studded cast all around. Anthony
Interview with a
Hopkins.
Vampire is one of my favorites.
That's a really
Pretty
good
good.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one. And weren't you? Did you Queen of the Damned this year?
I was.
I seen a
that's
picture of
awesome.
that.
I was
Yeah,
all. I made that.
you made that whole
thing.
costume.
I did.
Yeah, Interview with a Vampire and Queen of the Damned, and all
All
Anne Rice
together.
stories. You know.
Yeah.
So.
I know that Queen of the Damned has like its hardcore fans, but I was like super let down with that movie. Like after, because Interview with a Vampire is so good, and it's like that's supposed to be the sequel to it, and it just I just watched it and I just couldn't.
It had a lot to live up to from
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's the problem with modern movies. They were like, well, let's give it that Blade feeling. You know what I mean? Like that's what they were like. That's what was popular then. You know. So
Yeah.
Interview is a way better movie, but not a way better soundtrack though. I do love.
True.
I love the Queen of
Very
the Damned
true.
soundtrack. So.
That's another movie. Like I saw it once in the theaters and I haven't seen it since. And that, I don't know when that came out.
What I always thought would have been a
long-ass
good
time.
Anne Rice novel that to turn into a movie was a book that she wrote called Memnoch the Devil, and it's like it's kind of askew from the whole Lestat storyline, which is basically your first 4 books. But I don't know if anybody reads, but it was a book called Memnoch the Devil, and it's fucking really good. Like probably your best work. And I always thought that should be a movie, but they went with the vampires instead. You know, vampires they kind of took the reins when it came to spooky monsters.
Yeah.
You know?
Vampires are so hot right now.
Yeah, vampires are hot. Zombies are hot right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, are they ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you go to the fucking zombie walk yesterday?
No, I stayed at home and chilled.
It's
Did you-
awesome.
Did you go to that?
I chickened out and ended up just staying home and relaxing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was shot.
I was pretty hungover from Friday. So.
Man.
We
Yeah.
did the Thriller.
Yeah,
They did,
it was
that's
pretty
the-
cool. Yeah. That was cool. They were doing the Thriller like the whole way around. I don't know how fucking far they were.
That would have to suck to like stop momentarily every now and then and do a Thriller routine.
No, they just did it. They never
As
stopped.
they were
It just
walking.
fucking kept going.
I'd have been done. I'd have been like,
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I was on all chiller and no Thriller.
It was like right by my apartment too, so I was like, fucking. It would be weird like if I came out and didn't know that this was going on, and all of a sudden it's just like fucking, like
Well, I guess I'm
400
not going
zombies just
shopping.
fucking strolling around.
Context is very important to the zombie party.
Yeah. Like what the fuck? Just ran up and start bashing people in the head.
Zombie Walk is pretty cool. I've been to a couple of them, but not. I walked in one of them and then stood there for a couple others. But
I always thought it would be cool to perform at that, but they don't want
yeah,
no
me
hip
too.
hop shit.
Yeah, they don't want no hip hop shit. Me too. I mean, like with the BMA, we've done a Halloween show every year. Like I've always tried to associate us with Halloween, and then the rest of the community ain't having it. But still, to me, I'm like, no, we always consider ourselves one of the kings of Halloween because we spent so much money on a tailor-made show for it. But yeah, they still don't. They don't want nothing like that. You know what I mean? Like we even had a song that was about zombies. You know what I mean? And like they're like, nah, no. If it was a rock song, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it was something a little more family friendly, but like the whole song, I'm like talking
That's
about how I
part
like.
of it.
Yeah, family friendly. You know what I mean? Which is something that we don't cater to very well at all.
They had at your show the other night. Whenever you guys did the Night Flyer song.
Yeah.
I was with Kathy and she's like, "Hey, that's our theme." Like,
Oh yeah,
yep.
yeah. She didn't know where that came from. Where did that go? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that show was pretty fun. And we got another one on Halloween night in Brookings too. But,
Nice.
Yeah.
you know what we
Cool.
did that I was super proud of was like we set up these 2 big 8-foot projectors and then like played these like really cool. They're called Atmosphere Fear FX
Yeah.
videos, and they were. I think that made that whole show. You know, there wasn't a lot of people there to appreciate it, but I appreciated it because I put in all the work. So
It was fun.
That
Yeah.
was cool. That was cool.
It was a fun show. You know, I mean, sometimes when they're a little smaller or a little more personal and stuff like that too, you don't have
That's
to.
a
like,
tough night to put a show on though, because like especially this weekend, like every bar in town has
Yeah.
some shit going on.
Yeah,
you know
it's
what
like
I
I
mean?
felt bad staying home because I had like 6 outstanding invitations to people who were like, "Or you're coming to my thing, right?" I think
Right.
maybe that's why I stayed home.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, they're
Well, you
like,
know, 6 years ago there wasn't hip hop Halloween parties, and now there was 2 yesterday and
yeah, it's
2 the day
everywhere.
we did it, and you know, like the only 2 hip hop Halloween parties that really have ever gone on since we started throwing Monsters Ball was Soul Crate's been doing the rap karaoke, and we've been doing Monsters Ball. So, but now like there's major amounts of competition. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
I mean, you know, and I'm not trying to compete with anybody either, but it's just like one part of me is like, well, shit, now everybody's throwing a fucking Halloween party. And the other part of me is like, that's cool. Look what you kind of pushed a little bit.
Yeah.
Hip hop Halloween parties are kind of a staple now for the past 2 years at least. And it's like, well, at least you set that trend.
Yeah.
In your own mind, in my own mind, we helped set that trend, and now we're moving on.
You're an influencer.
Yeah, now we're going to go on to Easter parties, and everybody can stay the fuck away from my Easter parties for a couple of years.
Easter parties. That'd be cool. With
No,
fucking Fat Jesus.
Yeah. Fat Jesus.
Perfect.
Yeah. Be good.
Yeah, but we got another one coming up Halloween on Brookings, and that should be pretty fun too. You know,
I haven't performed in Brookings in forever.
nobody
It's,
has. It's kind of an anomaly why it hasn't happened yet. But I honestly, like, I kind of think like maybe the city of Brookings really pushes its weight around when it comes to any sort of new entrepreneur or anybody that wants to own a business. You want to own a business in Brookings, it better be the business that we want you to own.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they don't have liquor competition. They didn't.
Aberdeen's like that
Yeah,
too.
they didn't allow a Taco Bell there for like 20 years because like
Yep.
the Taco John's guy was on the board. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So it's
really?
like shit like that. Brookings is very.
That's small town because it's like I've seen that happen in Huron and saw that happen way too fucking much in Aberdeen.
Yeah.
So hearing that Brookings is like that too, I'm kinda like, oh man, because I
Yeah.
figured they'd be a little better with the university, but no.
No, live music hasn't really gone down there. They used to have Bash in the Grass in the 90s or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, like, I don't know what happened, but it seems like Live Music Bridge has been burned since then.
The last show I did there was this is gotta be at least like 5 or 6 years ago, but me and Maniac went up there and then the guy was trying to not fucking pay me, and I made him go to the ATM. Like, I went with him to the ATM, like, no, you're fucking paying me. I came up here for this shit. And we did that shit, so I got paid, but I had to like fucking hold his hand and like,
Yeah.
like, look, I got committed and everybody was like,
Right.
you're gonna get fucked up if we don't get fucking paid.
Right. Well, for sure, man. Well, you know, janky ass promoters, you know.
Without saying that, but it was implied that some shit was gonna happen.
Was
but,
implied. It always needs to be, you know what I mean?
yeah, and then fucking I can't remember the same guy. He like hit the after party. The after party was at fucking Pizza Ranch or whatever the fuck they have. Do they have a Pizza Ranch?
Yeah,
there?
they got one.
Yeah, and like they bought all the artists pizza, and Maniac was talking shit to some chick, and she slapped the shit out of him.
Yeah.
It's on video on YouTube somewhere.
Nice.
Yeah, that was my last experience in Brookings.
That's hilarious. Just talking shit and got slapped.
Yeah, and it was. I'm sure Maniac, whatever he said, I'm sure he deserved to get slapped. But, like, then they played it off like, oh, this bitch just, like, slapped him. And it was like, that's okay, that's not okay. And, like, you know, I don't know, stupid, but it was funny.
That's funny. Yeah, Maniac was supposed to play with me on Tuesday, you know, for the show.
Yeah.
He had to skip it due to some family stuff, but,
Yeah.
you know, so hopefully, best wishes to whatever he's going through. You know, I don't ever ask anybody to elaborate why they can't do something for me. I just accept it. So,
Yeah.
you know, hopefully everything's going well with him, and, you know, he definitely has my blessing, no hard feelings there. So, Maniac is insane. So it's like, The Maniac's like one of those rappers, like, once you become buddies with, you don't ever want to piss him off because he's so fucking good. I don't need Maniac writing diss songs about me right now, you know what I'm saying?
Our song today is a DayWalkers song.
Is it DayWalkers song?
Yeah.
Oh, that's sick.
Another Lonely Halloween or whatever.
Oh, that's what's up. Yeah, from the first album?
Yeah.
That is a good one. I love that first album.
Man, like, that album is so good. It's like fucking, like, almost 10 years old now. And they still haven't... That's the last project Maniac's, like, officially put out. And they've been talking about another DayWalkers album for fucking ever. And
I know the verse I gave him was for a DayWalkers song. Yeah. You know, so I was actually pretty honored because, you know, I've been listening to that horrorcore shit, like, long before I was ever... even got a chance to be considered as a rapper by anybody else. Yeah. So you hear, like, you know what I mean? Like, people like Maniac and other horrorcore people that you just hear about back then, and now they're kind of like your peers and stuff like that. It's kind of surreal. Yeah. I'm younger than everybody, you know what I mean? So when I was the teenager who you needed to convince to like your shit, I was that guy, and then now, you know what I mean? Everybody's 10 years older, and I'm in the level where I'm working on kids younger than me now, too, you know? Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, but that DayWalkers album is really good. And I've been bumping it for years and years because, you know, I had my ear to the underground like that for horrorcore.
Yeah, they went at your show. Like, I had like at least 3 or 4 people come up to me and like were talking to me about being a horrorcore rapper. I was like, I'm a fucking horrorcore rapper.
Right, yeah. Well, see, that's the problem. Me and Dirty have always dealt with that too. Like people trying to call us horrorcore and stuff like that, and it's like, wow, you know, I can't believe that. The fact that you take any kind of a spooky premise whatsoever and then just have to associate it with that, like, you know what I mean? Like, you completely strip me of my originality by saying that I belong to some kind of a juggalo subculture. Or, you know, you basically say, like, oh, you can't, you know, you don't really have, or in a position to make your own fan base because we've already pre-associated you with something that we don't fucking respect. And it's like, because that horrorcore shit, like, yeah, there's the reason why rappers don't like being called horrorcore is because there's so many shitty fucking juggalo rappers. Like, I'll paint my face and try to be like ICP. Oh. And then it's just like, oh, I killed your mom and you're dead, man. You know, and it's like there's like 50,000 of those.
Congratulations, that's the best horrorcore song.
Thank you. Yeah. And then there's like actual rappers who like aren't. They know they don't belong to like a mainstream market, so like they like my level of keeping it real is telling like really profound and kind of depressing stories and stuff like that, and then like they're like, that's horrorcore though. And I'm like, oh, somebody died in that? That's horrorcore then, you know what I mean? Sorry, I spit across the room, but you know, and it's like I hate that. I know Dirty hates the shit out of that too, you know what I mean? But we've dealt with it, you know. We have catered to juggalos quite a bit once we tried to accept that, but then once you find out like it's almost like you're not good enough for these scene kids to think you're anything less than horrorcore. But then when you go ahead and try to cater to that audience, they realize that you're not horrorcore. And then they're slightly not interested either. They're like, well, that's not exactly horrorcore like y'all said it was. Like, sometimes, like, we played Gore Fest one time. That sounds like the perfect spooky, you know. And it was like, we did pretty good, but they didn't expect us to just go up there and do a bunch of, like, rap songs that didn't pertain to not killing people. You know what I mean?
What is this?
We were like the black sheep of black sheeps at that show. You know what I mean? Because they're like, this doesn't fit the program, but it was good, but it doesn't fit the program. You know, so kind of weird how that works out, I guess.
Crazy.
But yeah, people calling you a horrorcore rapper now because you did 3 music videos.
Yeah. I was like, have you listened to any of my fucking music? Like, just because my last fucking song was like a Marilyn Manson song doesn't mean you know, all of a sudden I'm fucking chopping up bodies and fucking doing whatever.
Were you in that video?
I was.
Oh, okay. You were the mother to my father, right? Yeah. Oh, right.
Like, what the fuck?
Like the whole time I was like, this lady looks familiar, and then I realized I seen your Queen of the Damned picture on Facebook, so I was like, okay, maybe that's why. And then I just realized, yeah, you're the mom in his music video.
Way later.
Yeah, way later. It's Sunday. I'm not here. You know?
Yeah. I think that's a good enough time to transition into art to art.
Sure. Let's do art to art.
Were you in that video?
Was that you? Like at the end of the show? So much for intros, I guess. So that's Yeah, this is special episode number 13 of Art to Art as well. Then, this is really kind of cool that we've had a Halloween theme episode, and we're right in the cusp of the season and everything because today's guest is my partner in rhyme, my big brother, like one of my best friends in the whole wide world. 50% of the BMA, the Black Demon. Thanks for being on the show, Dirty.
So I love thanks for having me.
It's what you'll be hearing is like, so for you as the audience, yeah, you can call him Black Demon. I call him Big Dirty all the time. So you'll be hearing me calling him Dirty and stuff, but you might be hard pressed to find his music if you look up Big Dirty. So don't get it confused. It's the Black Demon. I call him Big Dirty. Well, Dirty, what we do here is every episode we have this segment, the Art to Art, where me as an artist can come, can connect with another artist and just kind of get your opinion on some of the same questions that I have answers to or would like to be asked, you know what I mean? So we'll just kind of move into the first one, but I usually always ask, what is, like, your major inspiration involved with? So, like, you're a rapper. Ouch. You're a rapper. What is your main inspiration to be that? Where did that come about? When did you want to start doing that?
Things like the first time I heard a Biggie song, being from back in Belize, back in those days, we didn't have the latest, records and albums and stuff like that. But I mean, it started like, I used to always listen to my dad and my uncle play the guitar. So I fell in love with like instruments. I don't know how to play one, but I always liked it. And then, like I said, after I heard like the first Biggie track, and I just thought that was dope, like putting words together, playing with words, like, and telling a story and a message at the same time. So I was like, that just locked me in there, and that's where it started. I started writing. So
how old were you around that time?
I was about probably like 12.
Dang.
Around 12.
Yeah, that seems to be like I was pretty much the same age when I wanted to get into rap. You know what I mean? I think like that seems to be like the most influential age, the preteen area. Whatever music that you discover that your parents didn't listen to is going to be what you associate yourself with either for a long period of time or forever. And that's pretty awesome that Biggie was your Biggie, huh? That's crazy. See, my first rapper was Eazy-E. Yeah. So that's crazy that Biggie is yours. That's pretty cool. Do you have any other kind of passions or anything besides hip hop, like when it comes to extracurricular stuff in your life?
Man, I like to cook. I'm a big boy, so I like to eat. So, I'm on that Action Bronson tip. I like to chef it up in the kitchen. Right.
Yeah, and I've ate Dirty's food. It is fun. Like he can really get it up there. You know what I mean? Like his chops. It's not just like.
What's your favorite thing to cook?
Man, like we like back home, we call it stewed chicken. It's like got that islandy taste to it. Rice and beans, all cooked with the coconut milk and veggies. And
nice.
Yeah, we put food in it, so it's pretty good.
Huh. Chicken, yeah, like that seems to be like one of your favorite ingredients. Everything I think I've ever ate from you was just like a different kind of chicken. Yeah. I mean, like, it is, and then like you eat some of the fucking nastiest, hottest hot sauce I've ever ate. And he uses like ketchup on everything, and I can't even stomach it. It's pretty good, but yeah, you are a phenomenal chef. Do you have any background with that, or is that just like something you just like to do? Like,
it's just, if you're hungry, you gotta learn to cook, man. You gotta learn to take care of yourself. I was raised by my sister, so after my mom died, so I had to learn to cook, plus I like to eat, so.
Right, yeah. It's just, there's no visuals. I mean, if you can't tell by his voice, he is literally the size of a tree. You know what I mean? Like, everywhere we go, actually, they ask Dirty if he plays football. He like, you know what I mean? Like, we were just at a Mexican restaurant yesterday. He's like, "You boys play football?" Like, I picked him up from the airport, and somebody thought he played for the Cardinals because he was wearing a Cardinals hat. And
should just say yeah.
That's what I told him. I said, start saying yeah. We did a show at the VFW in Rapid, and there was somebody in Custer they thought we were professional wrestlers. Like, no, I seen you on TV just like 2 days ago. And it's like, no, you really didn't. I don't know why you would say that.
We like catch and throw a folding chair in your face.
Yeah, so Dirty's gotten professional wrestler, football player, everything. I mean, everything that call him Shaq Light or Baby Shaq. You know. Yeah, but
Heard it all.
yeah, he's heard it all. But that's, you know, like out of my group, I'm the smallest person in my group. You know what I mean? Which is always kind of funny, but because
He's a skinny one.
yeah, I'm the skinny one. I'm 300 pounds and I'm the skinny one. So that's pretty. Another question that I like to ask when it comes to passions and especially rap music, and I ask every artist this is, well, how do you find? What is the best way for you to differentiate your real life priorities and your musical priorities? You know what I mean? Like, if that makes sense. Like, how do you find the time to create?
I try to put a little bit of my life into music. I don't like to give a lot because, you know, I mean, I'm not in it for the fame or anything, so I like that privacy sector of it. So I like to open up myself a lot, but I mean, I throw in some things there. I mean, I use life experiences to get my message across, but I just do it in a raw.
Right.
You know, I don't sugarcoat it. You know, I tell the truth or whatever. But basically, that's how I do it. You know, however I'm feeling that day or that time is what kind of attitude you're going to get on the song.
Do you like sit down to find? Do you like sit down to write, or do you do it just like when you're feeling it?
Yeah,
Like,
I sit down to write definitely.
you?
You know, listen to a beat, and from there to usually how I write the beat dictates what I'm writing about as far as mood and
right.
so. But yeah, I do sit down and write definitely.
See, I think specifically that's why we are like our dynamic is so, you know, like because we're completely two different people. Like if you hear him in a rap song, it's like a deep Belizean accent, you know, he comes from a different territory, and then it's me in my high-pitched screamy voice, you know, but he's right, you know, like we both started clicking when we realized that we just kind of let the beat tell us whatever to do. Like we don't ever sit down with a song premise. This song has a weird tone, so all of a sudden I'm going to write this punch you in the face theme to it, or I'm going to write this whole sad story theme to it, you know, and the one cool thing about me and Dirty is that like when we work on albums, we seldom ever write together, and it's kind of cool how when we can trust each other, they're like, okay, you go sit at home and you write your verse, and then when we meet back up to show each other, they're pretty much on the same level anyway, that we still got a song with the consistent theme without ever having to talk about it or
I always think it's weird when people want to write together.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, me too. Like
I've had like Danny Boy was like, come over and fucking write some music. What? No.
Like,
let's not do that.
Like sit in two separate corners of the room in silence and write. You know, like absurd.
Yeah. I was like,
but you know, like, we've been asked that question. Like, do you guys sit and think of everything you're gonna say? Like, how do you feed off of each other? And it's like really not. Like, we have songs that are like themed. We have a song called "Time's Up," and never did we ever discuss what the actual premise was. But we heard the beat, and we just knew the title was going to be called "Time's Up," and we both ended up coming with this like robbery scenario. It's like a different kind of story, and that's always worked for us in a really cool way. So, I know what you're saying there, but it does. It has to be dependent on how you feel, because we're not writing songs for the masses. We're just kind of writing songs that, you know, you really got to feel in them while you're listening to them. You know. We can't make people angry. They have to be angry first, and then they'll really like our shit. You know what I mean? Like, another question I have for you, Dirty, is like, I'm trying to think of how to word this next one, but it's, shit, I don't know. Edit this part out. I had a brain fart on the podcast. Do you find like, oh God, what's the best way to put this? It's like, it's like a mix between the two questions. Like, it's inspiration, and then fuck, I don't know. I forgot. I'm having like a terrible brain fart because I'm all hot.
Set it out, fart it out.
Yeah, fart it out. What else? What else do I normally ask people? Do you have any like do you have anything that if some other cat came up to you and was like, "Hey, Dirty, take me under your wing and give me some advice on how to get into what you're doing," what would be like the first thing you would tell them?
That you got to make sure this is what you want to do. You know, I mean, I think good music comes from not pleasing people. It's writing about your struggle. So you got to be in it. Like, it's in my DNA. I know it's in your DNA. It's in Night Shield's DNA. You know, it's not something I personally do for the limelight. It's just, I think I have a message that people can relate to, and that's all I'm trying to convey over, is just to get that message out. So that's where I get my inspiration from, and that's how I go into my writing process.
That's pretty cool though, because I think a lot of artists wouldn't admit that this is something that they're doing for themselves. They're like using it as like as therapy. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of artists will say they use it as therapy, but it's like, you know, really they're trying to be like, oh, I got this, whatever, what song, how am I about to blow up? You know what I mean? Like, the eye is always on the prize as an artist. So when you can say, like, I really don't have any fucking interest whatsoever to, you know what I mean? Like, of course we make, you know, we want to make some money.
Correct.
But if you don't, how do you keep going? I just think
that if you're a real artist, you'll have stacks and stacks of songs that probably ain't never been released.
Right.
That's just your therapy to get it out on paper.
Yeah.
And release it. So I just think, you know, and you say, nah, that's not for the radio to be recorded, but
yeah,
it's a song. It's in a song format, but it's not. That's just how you release, you know.
Yeah, personally, you know, knowing you have one of the most extensive collections of like used notebooks that I've ever seen. You know, like, hey, I don't know if like, have you had those like just ever since you was a kid? Like,
I try to save all my rhymes.
There's like 50 of them, like 50 notebooks. You know what I mean? That are just full of rhymes. And he's like, I've heard him besides the BMA. I've probably heard like 20 recorded songs that you've done. So I was like, holy shit, you know, like the difference between what you actually do. Like, you're basically like a writer. You know what I mean? It's like more of a writer than a rapper, but you know, you do have some amazing talent on the mic, so it's an honor to work with you there. I guess since I forgot the question I was going to ask you, we'll just go ahead and wrap it up and ask if there's anything that you want to plug, anything that you got going on right now, or anything like that you would like the audience to know about.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, Monsters Ball in Brookings, the 31st Halloween night. Yeah. I'd like everybody to come out, support the locals, you know, come for a good show. Other than that, man, you know, just hit up the Black Mask Armada. Some new projects coming out. Got a little visual out with some freestyles right now. Y'all can check that out, called Body Bags.
Yeah. And then
also in the midst of just wrapping up a single right now. And we about to do a remix to that, Rep Your Hood. But right now, yeah, just focusing on some solo tracks, and then down the line, you know, me and you gonna link up and bring back that fire to the Sioux, to the 605. So
for sure,
yeah, that's it right now.
And you can definitely check out Big Dirty through all Black Mask Armada social media sites, like you know, the Facebook and the Instagram and stuff like that. And we did create and release a video for him called the Body Bags Freestyle, which I'd encourage you guys to check out. It's definitely really good. Dirty, thanks a lot for being on the show, brother, man. I've had him all week. You know, I picked him up from the airport on Thursday, and I'm like, you're just going to do everything I'm doing all week, then, and we're going to have 2 shows and 2 podcasts.
My buddy.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So thanks for riding me with this week, man, and I appreciate it. And that'll do it for Art to Art, episode 13.
Thanks, right. Buddy. And with that, we will end this week's episode. Thank you guys for listening. Tonight's hip-hop selection is going to be from the DayWalkers, which is Maniac The SiouxperNatural and DUX. This was an album that was released on my record label back in 2009 called Dead by Dawn, and it's very timely. It's called Lonely Halloween. So check it out, and we will see you guys in a few weeks.
Cool. Yeah, sorry about that brain fart. Goddamn.